Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. So in this video, as you've probably guessed from the title, I'm going to be going through my May read and wrap up, and I have chosen the worst day to film this video because it's really hot outside and I already feel like I'm melting a little bit. So if I look like I'm struggling at any point during this video, then that is why, but I'm going to structure this video the same way that I've structured all of my wrap-ups so far this year. I'm going to start by going through the list of books that I read and the star ratings for all of the books that I read, and then I'm going to pick out a few to talk through in a little more detail. So the first book that I read in May was The American Roommate Experiment by Elena Armas, which I gave 2.5 stars, or it was somewhere between a 2 and a 3 stars. Another book that was somewhere between a 2 and a 3 stars was The Writing Retreat by Bartz, which was a little disappointing because I thought I was going to like this a lot more than I actually did. Next up, I read The Lost Daughter by Elena Ferrante, which was my most surprising book of the month because I gave this a 4.5 stars, but it was very close to being a 5. I then read A Curse of Roses by Diana Pinguicha, which I gave 4 stars. Wonderland by Jennifer Hillier, I also gave 4 stars. And then The Last Argument of Kings by Abercrombie, I gave 4.5 stars. I think this was joint favourite of the month. This is the last book in the First Law trilogy, which I did really enjoy. This was my favourite book in the series, but if you wanted my full thoughts, I do have a spoiler-free reading vlog for this series, which I'll leave linked in the cards and down below. Next up, I read The Binding Room by Nadine Matheson, which I gave 4 stars. This is the second book in the Anjelica Henley series, which is a British police procedural crime thriller series. The third book comes out later this year, and I am really excited to read it because I enjoyed this second book more than the first book, so I have a feeling I might enjoy the third book even more. I then read The No-Show by Beth, which I gave 3.5 stars. Then I read The Split by Laura Kay, which I gave basically 5 stars. It was more like a 4.5, but I really enjoyed it and I definitely want to read more books by Laura Kay. Then the final book that I read in May was The Worst Best Man by Sosa, which I gave 3.5 stars. So yeah, a bit of a mixed bag in May. We did have a few disappointments, but we also had 3 4.5 stars. So a little bit frustrating that they weren't quite new favourites, but overall a pretty decent reading month. The first book that I wanted to talk about in a little more detail was The Writing Retreat by Bartz. So this is a thriller that follows our main character, who's an aspiring author, and she's given this opportunity to go on this writing retreat that's being hosted by this other famous author. Well, not other famous author, because our main character isn't famous, but she's given this opportunity to go on this writing retreat. It's also very exclusive, so only 4 aspiring authors have been invited to this retreat. However, when they arrive, they find out that there's more to this retreat than they were initially told. Now, I gave this 2.5 stars, like I said, and I should have known that it wasn't going to be my kind of thing based on reviews. So a lot of people, when describing this book, were talking about how it's very unhinged and over the top, and I can confirm it was unhinged and over the top, which just isn't to my personal taste. I did really like the atmosphere and how it has this slow build up and it feels very unsettling and uncomfortable, and there's a complicated friendship between the main character and her former friend where you're trying to work out what happened like in the past and why they don't speak anymore. I did like certain aspects, but the ending just wasn't really for me, so I gave this 2.5 stars. I did like the audiobook narration though. It kept me entertained, which is always a good thing, and I would recommend it if you like this type of uncomfortable and unsettling thriller. Yeah, it's the kind of book where if I was watching this story as a movie, I probably would have really liked it, but the book just didn't quite work for me. However, I would recommend it if you're looking for a thriller that has LGBTQ+ rep, because I think this would actually be perfect if you do like this type of thriller. Next on my list is Wonderland by Jennifer Hillier, which I really enjoyed. read. I wasn't sure what to expect from this because I've read books by this author in the past, but I haven't given any of her books 5 stars. They've always been 3 or 4 stars, so I wasn't sure whether I should just give up on her books, but I was curious about the audiobook for Wonderland because when this originally came out in 2015, there was no audiobook. The audiobook literally came out this year and I found it on Scribd and I started listening and I really liked the narration. I'm glad I listened to the audiobook. This follows a main character who has recently moved to this small town where there's this amusement park called Wonderland, and this amusement park is basically the heart of this town. It's what brings in money and generates jobs, so it's pretty important that it stays open and it keeps on running. I think it's been in this town for like 50 years or something like that. However, at the start of the book, a body is found in this amusement park and a teenage boy who works there has also gone missing. So our main character is a detective and she is given this case to work on, but there's a lot of pressure from the people above her to solve this case quickly and in a satisfying way. Really love the setting for this because I do love a small town setting, and I liked that we had multiple points of view as well. So we had the perspective of the main character, but we also had perspectives of other characters who I hated, but I liked that I hated them. There were a few points where I had to really suspend my disbelief, but the ending was really satisfying. Like, there was one thing that happened towards the end which was really well done, so I did enjoy this overall. There are twists, but I think it's more that you go through the book without knowing certain information and then you gain that information as you go, kind of like in a real police investigation. The way it ended was and wasn't what I was expecting, and I kind of liked that. I would pick up more books by this author because I think this is probably my favourite of hers that I've read so far. Content warnings for grooming and also graphic descriptions of murder, and the things that you might expect from a book like this. There's also really unlikable characters, but to be fair, I didn't mind that the characters were unlikable because it was still really entertaining. Next on my list is The Lost Daughter by Elena Ferrante, which was my most surprising book of the month. I wasn't expecting to love this as much as I did, but I definitely want to read more books by Elena Ferrante. Considering this is only 140 pages, there's a lot that happens in those 140 pages. It's basically a character study, and we're following this middle-aged woman whose daughters are now in their 20s and they've moved to Canada to be with her ex-husband. So for the first time in a really long time, she has this newfound sense of freedom, and over the summer she decides to go to this coastal town where she spends a lot of time on the beach people watching, and in particular she develops this obsession with this family that she sees there. It is basically a character study. We spend a lot of time in this woman's head, and she's not likable, but also I think Elena Ferrante does a really good job of taking you inside her mind and showing you her thought processes, but also there's a lot that's left open to interpretation. I wasn't sure about the ending at first, but I really liked this and I definitely want to read more from this author. Next on my list is A Curse of Roses by Diana Pinguicha, which is a YA historical fantasy that feels more historical than fantastical because it is based on a Portuguese legend. It follows this main character called Isabel who has this curse where every time she touches food it turns into flowers. So she is starving and she's told that if she's able to track down this enchanted Mora, this girl will be able to break the curse. However, when she actually tracks down this enchanted Mora, she's told that she's not able to break the curse. However, she can teach her how to control her magic and possibly reverse it, so she'd be able to turn turn flowers into food, which would be a big help because at this time her country is struggling with a famine, so people are starving, and Isabel is a really kind-hearted person and she can obviously relate to her people because she hasn't been able to eat much for years ever since she developed this curse. I would really recommend this, especially if you're looking for a slow burn sapphic romance. I thought that the characters were really likeable and their romance was really sweet. Even though this is marketed as YA, I did want to give some content warnings because this was a little darker than I was expecting. So content warnings for disordered eating, self-harm, and also internalized homophobia, which was quite uncomfortable to read at times. Religion is a big theme within this book, so again, something that I wanted to mention. I am starting to get really hot, so I'm going to try and get through these next few books quickly, but one book that I did want to talk about briefly is The American Roommate Experiment by Elena Armas. So this is a companion novel to The Spanish Love Deception, which I really liked, but I didn't like this one as much, I think because I just didn't feel that invested in the romance. I didn't feel that much chemistry between the two main characters. We're basically following a main character called Rosie, I think her name is, and she is in a bit of a sticky situation because the ceiling in her flat has just fallen through. So because her best friend is currently on honeymoon, she goes to stay there because she has a spare key. What she doesn't realise is that her friend has already told her cousin that he can stay in this apartment. So they end up agreeing to share this apartment while he's in town. And you would think that that would create some great sexual tension, but I just wasn't feeling anything. I was quite bored at times, and it's such a shame because I feel like the premise for this could have been really good. Like, the main character is a romance author, I think, but she's in a bit of a writing slump, and the love interest offers to help her with that by taking her out on dates, and so it could have been cute, but I felt like I was just reading a book that had these scenes that should have been sweet and that should have made me feel invested, but I just wasn't feeling anything. So yeah, I gave it 2.5 stars. The dialogue in this also felt really cheesy and not very realistic, and there were lines in this that made me cringe, and not in a good way. I don't know if I will read any more books by this author because I did like The Spanish Love Deception, but I only gave it like a 3.5 or a 4 stars. I think I might give her one more chance. I know that she has another book that's coming out later this year, so I might read that and then just decide if I want to continue picking up her books. Next on my list is The No-Show by Beth O'Leary, which I was a little disappointed with, I'm not gonna lie. I have enjoyed other books by this author, but this was just okay. It's not a romance at all. I don't know why it's being marketed as a rom-com because I did not find it funny. It follows 3 main characters who, most of them have been through some kind of trauma in their past, and the book opens with each of these women getting stood up by the same man on Valentine's Day, and then you follow the story as they go about their daily lives. It's very slice of life, but obviously all 3 of them are interested in this same guy. So I was not thinking of this as being a romance. I wasn't invested in any of the romances, and I thought the ending was clever and it was satisfying. However, the middle portion of the book, I was kind of bored. Next on my list is The Worst Best Man by Mia Sosa, which I keep wanting to call The Wedding Planner. It's not called that. I think it's because it follows a wedding planner called Lena. She's our main character, and she is given this great opportunity to work for this hotel as their in-house wedding planner. So it's a great opportunity. She really wants this job. However, she ends up having to work with this guy who is the brother of her ex-fiance. So Lena was actually left at the altar a few years ago by this guy, and this guy and his brother run the marketing for this hotel, which Lena wasn't aware of. So she ends up having to work with this guy called Max, and it's about their romance, and it's about them working together on this presentation for Lena to get this job. And Yeah, I wasn't sure about this at times because I liked the main characters individually and I thought they had a lot of depth. However, I didn't feel that much chemistry, so I found myself not really caring either way about the romance, and also it was a lot smuttier than I was expecting, which isn't a bad thing, but the smut wasn't really my kind of thing because they talked quite a lot and it took me out of the story, but at the same time I appreciated that the characters were communicating, so it was very confusing. There were some really funny moments though. I actually highlighted a few passages because it made me laugh out loud, but also I was getting secondhand embarrassment and I was cringing, but I kind of liked that because I think it worked for this kind of story, and I think this would actually make a really good movie. It felt like a rom-com, so I would recommend it. I really liked this one. I don't think it's going to stick with me long term, but it was a fun time while I was reading it. The final book that I wanted to talk about in this wrap-up is The Split by Laura Kay, which was almost a 5 stars. As soon as I started reading this, it was giving me 5-star feelings, and I think it's because I found the main character really relatable, which, take from that what you will, because the main character is pretty much a mess for most of the book, but I think it's understandable because you do learn right at the beginning that she has gone through a breakup. Her girlfriend has just broken up with her, so she leaves their home in London, steals the cat, and moves back to her dad's in Sheffield, and it's essentially a coming-of-age story, but where the main character is in her late 20s. She spends a lot of time moping around at the start of the book, and her dad very gently suggests that she gets in touch with this guy Jeremy, who she used to be friends with back when they were teenagers. He's like a family friend, and he can kind of relate to what she's going through because a year earlier he broke up with his boyfriend, so they bond over this shared heartbreak, and Jeremy comes up with this idea of running a half marathon, so you follow them as they're training for that, and I loved it because I'm currently training to run a 10k race in September, and I really loved the discussions around getting into fitness, and I just loved the characters. I thought the platonic friendship between Jeremy and Ali, the main character's name is, I thought that was done really well, and I also liked that there was a relationship that develops between our main character Ali and her running coach. I did think that the relationship could have been developed more, but also I feel like this book is much more about the main character's personal journey. The only thing that stopped this from being a 5 stars is because there was something that happened towards the end which wasn't out of character, but also it was so frustrating and it annoyed me. So yeah, that's why I gave it a 4.5 stars, but I think with time I'm gonna think back on this and think, yeah, that was basically a 5 stars, and I'm really excited to read more books by Laura Kay. I'm actually planning to buddy read her other book, Tell Me Everything, I think it's called. I'm planning to buddy read this with Aoife from Pretty Purple Polka Dots in July, hopefully, so I'm hoping I love that just as much. The main character in that also sounds like a bit of a mess, so I'm probably gonna love it, let's be honest. I have been talking for over an hour, so I'm really worried that this wrap up is gonna be a lot longer than it usually is, but that does bring us to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you made it this far, let me know in the comments what was your favourite book that you read in May, and have you read any of the books that I talked about in this video? Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, and click subscribe if you would like to see more videos from me, but otherwise I will see you next time. Bye!